So we talked a little bit about this on my DLive stream, dlive.tv/Vincent James. If you're not following over there, follow to get notified for when I am live streaming. I am only exclusively streaming on DLive, not because I don't want to use YouTube, but because I have been banned from YouTube permanently. So check the links in the description below and follow over there. But I want to talk about this. We talked about this on stream. There was a couple of attacks that have occurred. There was a couple of home break-ins that have occurred. And there was all sorts of insanity, as you have noticed, going on in the streets that has led to an effect, and a very apparent effect. And one of those effects is that white Americans specifically are becoming increasingly aware of what exactly is going on. And the white support, particularly for Black Lives Matter and for the riots that have been going on for months and months and months, has basically flatlined. And this is the rise in racial consciousness that we talked about on my DLive stream. So we're going to get to that. Before we do, I just want to remind you that we have BitChute. We have a BitChute account, and this is where you're probably watching right now, but this is where we're going to be posting daily videos. This is the official BitChute account, 38,051 subscribers. Let's go ahead and refresh. 38,075 subscribers over there. I also have a Parler account, so you'll find that at parler.com/RealVincentJames. And then we have Subscribestar and Patreon, which are both essentially the same platform, same type of a platform. Subscribestar is available for those who don't want to support on Patreon. And at this tier here on Subscribestar and this tier here on Patreon, you will get access to all of the full-length live streams that are deleted on DLive, as well as other exclusive content. So make sure to check that out. All the links in the description are below. But I want to get to this first story. We're going to start this out with sort of the home invasions that have been occurring, the interracial attacks against white Americans, random white Americans walking down the streets that have been occurring, and then, of course, the effect of this, the effect of the riots, the effect of people seeing these attacks occurring. So we'll bring up this story first, and this is something that we went over on my DLive stream, and this is out of Chicago, actually the suburbs of Chicago. 3 charged in Wheaton, Lombard, home invasions, and shooting, DuPage County officials say. And it goes on to give us a little bit of insight into the break-ins. Now, one thing I have to note, and this is something that I highlighted on the stream, is that there are millions of home invasions each year. Usually it's the case that about 1 out of every 4 people are home. People are home at the time of the break-in. Now with coronavirus and increasingly many people working from home, kids are home, so people have to stay home and work from home, and employers have to allow this because of restrictions that are in place. And because of this, because these things are happening, it is going to be the case that people are going to be home more often in these home break-ins. And so you have to make sure that you have means to defend yourself if this occurs in your neck of the woods. And so we'll read through this first report. It says the first break-in was the morning of August 23rd in the 1700 block of East Evergreen in Wheaton. Police said of the residents went outside at about 5 a.m. to investigate suspicious activity when 2 men confronted one of the residents. Police said that's when the second suspect entered the home holding a handgun and directed the victims to walk toward the back of the home. Once inside, one of the men entered a bedroom where 2 young girls and their grandmother were sleeping, authorities said. One of the men attempted to pull down the blanket and shorts of one of the girls. The man hit the grandmother and fought with the girl's father, police said. Police said both of the suspects then fled the scene in a dark-colored sedan. They don't really give any insight in between what happened from this point to this point. Now, Wheaton and Lombard, if you look at the racial demographics of Wheaton, these are like 90% white suburbs, and these people are coming from the city of Chicago and targeting these white people in these suburbs for these break-in attempts. It says a similar situation was reported in nearby Lombard 40 minutes later. Police said suspects went into a home in the 400 block of South Highland, threatening a young woman inside. Police said a man pointed a gun at one of the residents and said, "Where's the money?" before going to an upstairs bedroom where a mother and a daughter were sleeping in the same bed. One of the men ordered them to the main floor of the home, then ordered the daughter to the basement and told her to remove her clothing, authorities said. When one of the girls refused and fled, prosecutors said her father struggled with the attacker. At one point, police said one of the suspects fired shots that struck the father in the chest, went through him, and ultimately struck the other suspect as well. Doctors said the resident did not suffer any life-threatening injuries. Then the other two men ran from the home and fled the scene in a stolen vehicle, police said. Berlin said the two incidents were connected and 3 people were arrested. And we have the 3 people, the mugshots of the 3 individuals who were arrested. Now, of course, what they're trying to do is make mugshots, is to get rid of mugshots because they're racially biased, according to them, just like they tried to get rid of the gangs database in a lot of different cities and have successfully gotten rid of the gangs database in a lot of cities because it contains too many people of color and it's racist to have these gang databases. But of course, this is just the inevitable result of Black Americans committing the highest rates of crime in basically every single criminal category. So we have the 3 people here. We have 2 individuals here who are male, and 1 individual here who is driving the getaway car who is female. Now, we also have this story here, and this is just the reason why I bring up the story isn't because it's like it's crazy like the other story that happened in Chicago or the story that we're going to go over following this story. But it's really representative of what's been going on in New York City for the longest time, where you have just chaos in New York City. We have the report from the New York Times, which we went over just a couple of weeks ago, that said that moving companies are turning people down because they have too much business. The rate that people are moving out of New York City is so high that moving companies are completely turning people down. People are fleeing to the suburbs. People are fleeing to rural areas. And so we have this story here of this man who attempted to rape a woman, a 25-year-old woman, on the subway in New York City. We also saw stories of Bill de Blasio putting very violent criminals, rapists, sex offenders, violent criminals who have committed violent crime, people who have shot people in luxury hotels throughout New York City. And these people are descending onto the street and basically harassing and attacking people who are, eating their food at restaurants or just going about minding their own business. And this is contributing to the massive exodus, the mass exodus that we were seeing out of New York City and other cities across the country. And such is the case in Portland, right? We saw reports come out. We have this report up on the redelephants.com that talks about how Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler declined federal riot assistance just 48 hours before Antifa terrorists assassinated the Trump supporter in Portland. But we saw other examples of businesses fleeing Portland. So there was a Business Insider post that came out not too long ago. We also went over just the other day where it said that businesses are fleeing en masse from the city of Portland. And this is happening all across the country, right? This is happening in New York City. This is happening in Chicago. This is happening in Baltimore. This is happening in Portland, in Seattle, as police are defunded, as crime surges, and as arrests go down, and as millions of people are being released from jail because of coronavirus, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, as far as what the politicians tell us. And then, of course, add on top of that all of the riots that are occurring and how these politicians react to the riots, right? Refusing federal assistance just 48 hours leading up to a deadly shooting. This is the same thing that we saw happen in Seattle in terms of the leaders and the politicians in Seattle as well, where they let the Chaz Chop Zone go on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it wasn't only until the mayor was threatened herself that she decided to dismantle the Chaz Chop Zone. And after 6 shootings occurred in that particular zone. Now, this is one of the stories that I really want to highlight today, and we have this story up on the redelephants.com as well. Media is not really talking about this. Now, to be fair, we don't know exactly when this happened, but it seems to be the case that it's recent. One of the original posts was just from yesterday, and it was by an account named Trey Savage, and he says, young man, you got knocked the F out. Bitch, you better not run. Unc tried to kill you. Unc, so I guess assumingly, I'm assuming he's referring to his uncle, tried to kill you. Explore page, explore Baltimore. So it occurred in Baltimore. White lives do not matter. Black lives matter. And this story is about a white male who was knocked unconscious with a brick in an unprovoked hate crime. And Instagram refused to ban the uploader who filmed the crime, saying white lives matter. So we're going to take a look at this clip now, and then we'll get to this story. So here's the clip that occurred. And of course, the mainstream media is completely disregarding the story, as they always do. Now, we've seen hundreds of instances just like this. We've seen hundreds of these black on white attacks occur over and over and over and over and over again. And the media tries to attempt to, completely brush them under the rug. But of course, we know the statistics. We know that 98% of the interracial crime is black on white in America. We know the statistics behind interracial homicide. We know the statistics behind homicide. I mean, just 6% of the population commits over 50, 60, 70% of the homicide in the country, black males. 90% of the homicide in the city of Chicago. The highest rate of crime ever in almost every single criminal category. We know that you are not going to be able to find something like this in the reverse. You are not going to be able to find an example, a viral video of a white man creeping up, sneaking up behind a black man and hitting him in the head with a brick. But if you did, you can definitely guarantee, you can definitely be sure that the media would find this story, would make the story, widely reported, that every single national media outlet would be talking about this particular story, and that riots would follow and chaos would follow, just like with Cannon Hinnant. If that was in the reverse, I mean, we would see destruction, irreconcilable destruction and chaos. Like we never could imagine if there was a white man who walks up to a black child on his bike, just riding his bike in his front yard, minding his own business, and shooting him point blank in the head, executing him in broad daylight. We know what would happen if this was in the reverse. We've said this time and time and time again. But this is an attack. This is just one of the hundreds of attacks, thousands of attacks that is leading to the effect that we're going to talk about today. Now, I want to say this. Donald Trump is beginning to highlight a lot of these stories. Donald Trump is beginning to retweet certain stories like this as well, which is only adding to this effect. And Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL, who, the Anti-Defamation League, this massive Jewish group, this very powerful Jewish group that has control over all of the social media companies and who they allow on their platforms and who they don't allow on their platforms, who they ban from their platforms. He says it's gut-wrenching to see POTUS uplifting a race-baiting violent video posted by a white supremacist Groyper account. Right? And this is constantly the response. This is constantly the response that they have to whenever Donald Trump retweets or shares a video like this. And then, how do the politicians react? We know how the media reacts, right? How do the politicians react? Well, this is just one of the reactions here. This is from San Francisco, with burglaries up 42% year to date. And remember, I said, like home invasions, burglaries, this is increasing, but it's also going to be increasing the amount of people who are going to be home at the time of these crimes. So be careful and make sure that you have a means to defend yourself and make sure that you learn how to use whatever weapon you are going to purchase in order to defend your home, yourself, your property, your family. With burglaries up 42% to date under Boudin, he's talking about Chesa Boudin, the district attorney in San Francisco. SFPD sources are telling me that Boudin's office is telephoning burglary victims and asking them to drop their case as a favor to restorative justice. So basically what the DA of San Francisco is doing, who is Chesa Boudin, who has been called a communist by the police in San Francisco, whose adoptive parents are Bill Ayers and Bernadine Doran, two far-left communist terrorists who have committed crimes in the past, and biological parents are two far-left communist terrorists, part of the Weather Underground movement, part of the formation of that Weather Underground movement in the 1960s, who are in prison right now today. What this district attorney is doing right now is calling white victims of black crimes and telling them to drop their cases to help along restorative justice of a people who have been oppressed in our country. That's basically what the DA is doing in San Francisco and what district attorneys and prosecutors are doing nationwide, frankly. We also have this story here. This is from the American Renaissance, and I just wanted to address this story. It's because it's regarding a man who was a part of the Sandia Labs, and many of you know this story, right? Many of you know how the top nuclear research facility for the United States government was basically holding like a re-education camp for white Americans, talking about their white privilege, talking about their whiteness and how they must deconstruct this whiteness in order to create a more equitable society for black Americans and people of color and so forth. Well, this man who worked for Sandia Labs posted this YouTube video, and basically what happened was that the video quickly hit 10,000 views within the labs, and dozens of Sandia employees contacted Peterson to express support. Within hours, Sandia executives dispatched a counterintelligence team to kick Peterson out of the network and scrub his communications from internal servers. So they're punishing him for coming out and sharing his opinion about the re-education camp, the mandatory re-education camp for white employees. Now, the reason why I brought this up is because this is also a form of attack on white people, outside of like physical attacks that we're seeing and what we're seeing from the media. This is also a form of the attack on white people that we're seeing across the country, which is at corporations and in companies and private companies and even public companies and part of the military and things like this, where military officials are sharing the book White Fragility around and making it mandatory for people under them to read. It's that we look at this, and whether it's at the Seattle City Council, where they also held a similar white education camp, white re-education camp, or here at Sandia Labs, we're seeing this over and over and over and over again, attacking you because you are white. Attacking you rhetorically because you're white, attacking you, calling you, saying that you have white privilege and that your whiteness is an issue, is problematic and it's inherently problematic, or attacking you physically. We see this time and time again. It does not stop. So what is the effect of this? Well, the effects of the riots are, number one, violent crime is now almost as important to American voters as coronavirus. But number two, the riots also have caused the ongoing riots, people seeing what's going on, people seeing the truth behind, how racial bias in policing is completely disproved by science, and seeing these numbers come out and seeing this data come out and seeing what's going on and how these cities are just allowed to burn down by these politicians, and these politicians make excuses for this, and they refuse federal help, and they bash Trump, and they blame Trump, and it's constantly like this blame game against Trump and the Republican Party. This has led to BLM's record approval completely flatlining, and especially among white Americans. So this is a report here from the Washington Examiner. It says BLM's record approval after George Floyd's death tanks amid riots throughout the country, and we break this down by race, and we can see that the white approval for Black Lives Matter has completely flatlined. It went from net 22 to -5 August 4th to 9/20. And then I know that September hasn't happened yet, but these are the polling dates, and the poll is going to continue, and we're probably going to see this drop even further. Approval went from 614, went 14 to 18. 2020 went from 59% to 45%. I also think it's important to add this in here. So this is a completely different poll. These are results from a completely different poll than the poll that I just showed you, and this was prior to the poll that I just showed you, prior to the shift in the poll that I just showed you. Now it shows that white support for Black Lives Matter has always been low. For blacks here, it shows 79% of black males support Black Lives Matter, almost 80%, and almost 90% of black females support Black Lives Matter. So this is the most racially aware, racially conscious group in America and in basically every country that they reside, and it's not even close. This group of people will support the black criminal no matter what he does. In the case of Detroit, we saw the black criminal pull a gun from his waistband and point it point blank at the police officer's head and fire it and try to execute him in broad daylight. They still rioted. They still protested after the police shot this man dead. In Chicago, we saw a man shoot at police officers. Following this, they rioted and looted luxury stores in Chicago, in downtown Chicago, on a Magnificent Mile, Michigan Avenue. And the Black Lives Matter leader for Chicago came out and said that this looting that occurred at these luxury stores in Chicago on a Magnificent Mile was a form of their reparations, and so it shall continue. And so regardless of what poll we look at, we're going to see support for Black Lives Matter high for the black American community, because they don't care what this person does. They don't care what the criminal does. They don't care if he has a sexual assault charge on his record, or if he has a felony, or if he robbed a pregnant lady, or if he shot directly at police officers. They will support the black criminal as long as his skin color shares their skin color. And so when they say Black Lives Matter, what they mean is only Black Lives Matter. This is what you have to understand. Now, it shows white support has always been low in this particular poll. It shows -19 for white males, plus 14 for white females. And then for Hispanics, it shows only 31% of Hispanic males support Black Lives Matter versus 56% of Hispanic females, 19% others for males, and 48% others for females. Now, if we look at the white support breakdown in this particular poll, it says that 40% of women, now this is by age 18 to 34, support Black Lives Matter. 8% of males age 18 to 34 support Black Lives Matter, and on and on and on. The older it gets, the less support for Black Lives Matter they have. Non-college grads, negative 27% for white males, negative 12% for college grad white males, and plus 3% for post-grad white males. So this is a completely different poll, shows completely different things, but I thought that this was important to add to to add to the context. So the white approval for Black Lives Matter continues to flatline, and it's going to continue to go down from there. Now, President Trump also saw an uptick in approval. And there are many polls out there that put President Trump many points ahead of Joe Biden in several key swing states, and especially among independents. I think Donald Trump is leading by double-digit points among independents, according to some polls. So this is very, very important. This effect is ongoing. And I wanted to specifically highlight white Americans in general, because I believe that white Americans are experiencing this rise in racial consciousness. And here's where we get to the funny part, because even among some left-wing YouTubers are expressing sort of this or showing that this is also affecting them the same way as well as they're attacked online. So we have this clip here from Destiny, and it's a short clip, and it's a clip of him being attacked by a Black American who is defending the riots, defending the looting, defending the burning. And here is how he responds. And typically this is not the case for him. Typically he's on the anti-white side. So let's take a listen to this clip here.
He came to kill people. He shot at people. He did kill people.
Wait,
Why
you
does
don't
it
know?
matter who was
Wait, what the
chasing him?
fuck? Wait, is this like the make shit up stream?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Is it not?
Who the
Is
fuck
it?
is
Is
talking to me?
it? Is it not true that?
Yeah,
Is
it
it?
is,
Is it not?
actually.
Is it not true that 2 people were murdered and 3 were shot by this
no, but
gentleman?
what's the
Wait,
timeline?
no one said he came. No one said he came to kill people. Who the fuck said that? You have no idea if that's true or not.
Who the fuck
What
is
is this?
talking to me?
This is Destiny, and he doesn't have his webcam
Destiny,
up.
suck my dick. Don't ever come in here talking to me stupid like that. You better introduce yourself and announce yourself the next time you decide to address me.
Nina.
Don't ever fucking talk to me like that again.
Oh hey,
'Cause I
I'm
was-
sorry. Okay, so So I'm Destiny, and I try to make sure that when we talk about breaking news, we're not rattling off some dumbass bullshit that we have no fucking idea what we're talking about. That's what I'm doing.
What Destiny? What is this?
Hey, and
What is?
I'm Nina, and I go through life not being a white piece of shit. Nice to meet you, Destiny. Don't ever fucking address me like that again. Like I said.
Damn, imagine in your introduction, the most important part of your identity is the fucking race you are. Holy shit! How fucking sad is yours?
Okay. This is derailing. This is derailing. Nina.
Never fucking met.
Nina.
You sorry ass white piece of shit.
Nina.
I didn't attack him. I didn't attack him for being white. I pointed out that he's a fucking white piece of shit because he is.
Oh, Nina.
Like stating a fact is not an attack.
Wait, can I say that you're a black piece of shit then? What do you mean? What the fuck does that have to do with anything?
Excuse you? It has you being a white piece of shit has everything to do with your mediocre ass white existence. But the reason I brought it up is because you came into this
does
chat.
you being a black piece of shit have everything to do with your black existence? You sorry ass black piece of shit.
Now, many of you might not know even who Destiny is, but he is in case you don't know, he is a pretty large left-wing YouTuber, sort of like of the neoliberal category. And basically, I brought him up because I think that it's almost as if he's done a complete 180 in terms of sort of his rhetoric surrounding some of these riots that are occurring, some of these protests that are occurring, and especially a complete 180 in terms of how people are reacting to the riots, how he's reacting to the riots, and especially the shooting of Kyle Rittenhouse. We have one more clip to go over before we get to another very important clip. So here's this other clip here.
The rioting needs to fucking stop. And if that means like white redneck fucking militia dudes out there mowing down dipshit protesters that think that they could torch buildings at 10 p.m., then at this point they have my fucking blessing, because holy shit, this fucking shit needs to stop. It needed to stop a long time ago. Like, holy fuck.
Absolutely true. It did need to stop a long time ago, but of course we see how Democrat politicians are defending this, calling it mostly peaceful. We see how the media reacts. We saw that very famous lower third from CNN who said that the riots were fiery but mostly peaceful, and they're really trying to hide a lot of this stuff that is happening in the United States of America. But thanks to social media, and this is why I'll continue to say that this should be the top issue for the GOP, social media, access to social media, and access to the seat at the table, and access to be allowed to push back on the mainstream media narrative. Because of social media, a lot of people are seeing the truth. And I'll end this with the clip that I've played before, and I've played on stream at least 2 times right now, and you might not like the person who's saying on this. I certainly don't. I think that in a lot of respects, this is probably this person is not a person where you should be taking information or listening to his takes on these things, but this is not like a mind-blowing take. This is a take that I've given many times before, is that as these riots continue, and excuse me for the construction that's going outside, but as these riots continue, this is going to add to the increase in racial awareness of white Americans. And we'll end on this clip. Make sure to check the links in the description below for D-Live, where my live show is every single day, Monday through Friday. Also, Subscribestar, Patreon, and other ways to find me. Here's this clip right now.
Both parties, that the parties have effectively got a stranglehold on power, right? And that stranglehold on power means that policy does not serve the public, and it hasn't for decades. So this is why I started where I did. I believe if you are to get anywhere, if Camille is right about what the solution actually looks like, then what you need is a governmental structure that actually gives a damn what the consequences of its behavior are, rather than parties that are cynically pointing us at each other so that we don't notice the corruption that they're involved in. That I really think is ultimately the only route out of this, because if we let the parties continue to play their role, they're going to start a race war. I mean, very predictably. No, I think the Democrats are basically cynically toying with partnering with this so-called anti-racist movement, and that is going to back whites against the wall and cause them to start seeing things racially in a way that they haven't in more than a generation, and that the net result of those two phenomena is that we are going to be headed to a conflict that nobody knows the way out of. And what's more, unlike our first Civil War, there's not even a geographic description of a solution, right?
I'm not sure about that, though, because you have quite a lot of whites that are no longer interested or exhausted in their own identity who are not going to be taking up that war. So it gets a lot more complicated than white versus black.
I agree it's more complicated, but do you see a way that it ends acceptably? I mean, you have a well-armed rural white population that is now correctly understanding that it is being targeted by a mob that claims it's guilty of all sorts of things that it actually isn't guilty of.
And that is absolutely the case. So that's what I have for you today on that. From the rising of the sun to its setting, may the name of the Lord be praised. From the rise of the sun to its setting, may the name of the Lord be praised. His splendor reaches far beyond the heavens. May the name of the Lord be praised. Glory to the Father from the rising. Make sure to check the links in the description below for D-Live, for Subscribestar, for Patreon, for Parler, and for Telegram, especially, and Instagram. Hope to see you over there on those other platforms. My goal is to eventually become a powerhouse of truth. That is why it is imperative that you check the links in the description below and go to either Patreon and Subscribestar and support us for at least the cost of a cup of coffee a month. We already have writers writing for TheRedElephants.com, but we'd like to bring on more in the near future. By the way, at TheRedElephants.com, you can also find t-shirts, hats, and other products. Check the links in the description below. It helps us out tremendously.